Happy Sabbath. Let us pray to start. Dear God in heaven, we thank you for a beautiful morning. We thank you for watching over us throughout the week and bringing us here once again to gather together as your children, that we might be able to eat of the bread of life. We ask that you may guide our thoughts, that you may give us your spirit to help us in understanding the things that we intend to study at this time. We ask that you may speak to us and that you may give us a special blessing now and throughout the day. It is our humble prayer in Jesus' name. Happy Sabbath again. If he was kind enough to give me her class, so at least we'll be able to finish what we started last week. So our topic today is a bit different from what we had last week. Last week we were talking about deadly wound and death, and I'll just give a quick recap to give context to what we will do today. Though I don't know if I should really be giving a recap because now we are recording studies and uploading them. So if you are not there, you should go to, what was studied. You go through it, and then when you come the Sabbath, you'll know what people were talking about the other week. But I will forgive you for today because I know you didn't watch the videos. But we had started by looking at the concept of the early rain and the latter rain. And we read some quotes, which basically told us that to understand the latter rain, you cannot benefit from the latter rain if you did not benefit from the early rain. So in short, what the latter rain is doing is maturing a fruit that had already started developing in the period of the early rain. Meaning if you did not benefit from the early rain, there's no fruit to even be developed by the latter rain. In short, you can't understand the messages we are getting during this history of the Sunday law if you didn't understand the messages that were taught between 2001 and the Sunday law. So that is the period of the early rain. So what that is calling for us to do is to go back to the messages, the old truths, for us to be able to understand what we are calling new truths, because new truth is not independent of the old truths. So on that note, we went to Daniel 11 verse 40, where we got the structure of deadly wound and resurrection. And I'll just draw those structures so that they can stay on the board. So we looked at Daniel 11:40 verse A and part A and part B. So part A was talking about the death and the deadly wound and death for the king of the north. So we saw in 1798, the king of the north received a deadly wound. 1799, they died to resurrect in the future. And we saw that before the king of the north received a deadly wound, there was a period of war that led up to the king of the north receiving a deadly wound. And we identified this as the French Revolution that began in 1789. So this is part A. Part B, that was talking about the king of the south. So we said that in 1989, the king of the south receives a deadly wound. 1991, this is their death, for them to resurrect at some point in the future. And we saw that before they received a deadly wound, there's a period of war that we can mark beginning in 1979, and we identified this as the Soviet-Afghan War that lasted 10 years. So that is the structure that we got. We saw that there's a period of war, and then there's a deadly wound, and then there's death, and then there's a resurrection. So when these kings, that is the king of the north and the king of the south, when they resurrect in future, we know that they resurrect not to live forever, but they resurrect and then they die again. But this time they are dying for good. They're not dying to resurrect again. So we started with the king of the south. Started with the king of the south. That is Russia. So if we are to work with the same structure, there is to be a period here where war begins. And we marked this as 2007. And then we saw that the king of the south dies at Peniam. And we explained that it's Peniam, it's also Beneventum. Sorry, receives a deadly wound. Only to die. So resurrects to die. And we saw that this was 2024, or the Sunday law. So we looked again at the glorious land. So when they die here, the death is complete. We don't expect a resurrection, so this structure doesn't apply. So here I put a question mark because I can't really explain, or maybe it will take long for me to be able to prove that. So the glorious land receives a deadly wound, and we said that this was July 18th, 2024. And the death, which we marked November 5th, 2024, and this death is complete. So these are the structures that we drew. And we saw that this glorious land here is the sixth kingdom. Yeah. So when we looked at the king of the south, we saw that we tried to explain how the war here, because this is period of war, began in 2007, and we introduced a player who is the other key figure in Russia, and we identified that person as Alexei Navalny. And we saw that 2007 was the Munich Security Conference. And there's the famous Putin speech that he gave at that conference in 2007, which was basically a declaration of war on the West. And the following year, he invades Georgia. So yes, we might mark 1999 as the rise or the resurrection of the king of the south, but it's not until 2007 that he actively declares war on the West. And his main concern is at this point he's considering, in 2007, he's considering NATO's eastward expansion as a threat to Russian national security. So we traced the history of Alexei Navalny from 2007 to him running for the mayoral elections, him being an activist, him being the main Russian opposition leader, his poisonings in 2017, 2019, 2020 twice, 2021 when he goes back to Russia after his treatments from the severe poisoning that he'd had in 2020. And then, so he's arrested, he's to serve, I think it was more than 20 years in prison. And then in 2024, on February 16th, we received news that he's dead. So we looked at the date, February 16th, 2024, and we saw that what was happening on that exact date, or that exact period, was the Munich Security Conference again, which happens annually in February from around 15th to 18th. So we saw that Putin is very keen on symbolism. There's a reason why they waited until February 16th to either kill him or announce that he was dead, because he was trying to send a message. But then we saw that Putin might have killed Navalny on that date, February 16th, 2024, but that was a defeat for Putin, because on that same day, there's a conference that they say, when the conference is happening, Alexei Navalny's wife, that is Yulia Navalnaya, is at the conference, and she gives a speech, and her speech is basically her declaring war on Russia, where she says that she's waiting for Putin to die, then she'll go back to Russia and run for presidency. So that is 2024. So we see that on that date in 2024, uh, that is Putin losing the information war, because he's not the only one that is giving. It's a war. Information war is basically a war on narratives, and Putin is not the main source of information. There's another key figure, that is Navalny, who is giving a contradicting narrative, which of course the entire Western world uh, is buying, and they are behind him. So apart from that, on October 22nd, 2024, Navalny had been writing a memoir, which is now published on that same year. And we can see more keenly Putin losing that war on information. So we looked at 2021, and we were trying to see how Putin receives a deadly wound in 2021. 2022 is when he invades Ukraine. But as early as 2021, the United States already has information, or that Putin is about to invade Ukraine. So they release this information to the world. And uh, they're releasing information that is showing the steps that Putin is about to take in Ukraine. So before Putin does anything, the United States is already releasing information about his attack. So the element of surprise that is usually an advantage when it comes to war, that is something that Russia doesn't have, because of the information that the United States is receiving. We also saw that because of that, because they knew that Russia was about to invade Ukraine, journalists were already streaming in Ukraine way before. So by the time the war is beginning, there's already lots of journalists in Ukraine who are giving uh, updates of what exactly is happening on the ground, which is something that was not happening before. For example, in 2014, people didn't really know what was happening on the ground. But now people have information. So this is not just Putin feeding people what he wants them to hear through the main Russian news outlets, but there are independent journalists who are giving the information as it is. So we can see in 2021 Putin losing uh, the information war, or the war on narratives. So we saw that was the King of the South receiving a deadly wound and dying. But something else that we saw, because Peniam is Beneventum, so 2021 is Beneventum, which is where Pyrrhus is defeated. And we saw that he goes to another battle, which is in Argos, where he goes to die, which also marks the fall of Tarentum. And we looked at Argos and the death of Pyrrhus, which we saw happens in steps. It doesn't happen at an instant. So we saw that the death of Pyrrhus is progressive. He receives a spear wound, and then immediately there's a woman who's watching the son that he is sparring with, and the woman drops a roof tile on his head, and he falls from the horse because of the roof tile falling on him, and then the soldier that he's fighting with decapitates him. So we saw that he dies in different stages, which we saw that we will see later that the death of the king of the south, we mark 2024, but we are to recognize that the death of the king of the south happens progressively. Um, so we came back and looked at the glorious land. So we gave ourselves, we didn't actually refresh, we just stated it as facts. About the year 273 BC and to 72 as well, which we mark as the Sunday Law, the same place we mark Argos. And we saw Quintus Fabius Maximus Gages that takes us to July as the Sunday Law, and in connection with elections. And we saw that there are several events that happen in July, in the month of July, beginning with July 1st, when we have the case Trump versus USA, where Trump is basically uh, declared a king, or he's granted immunity in official acts. So basically, he can do whatever he wants as long as he's in office, as long as he's conducting his official business, and he's untouchable. July 13th was the assassination attempt. July 15th to 18th was the RNC, where J.D. Vance is identified as as his running mate. July 18th, he is crowned as the flag bearer for the Republican Party. July 21st, Biden withdraws. July 22nd, Kamala Harris becomes the presumptive nominee. So we see that all these things that are happening in July are momentous events when it comes to the glorious land. The other thing we identified was that we mark the month of July, which is the seventh month. But it was okay. I won't go into the fifth month, the seventh month, all that. But the other person we mark there is Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar marked as a king in the ancient day. Not yeah, he marked the transition from Rome as a republic to ushering Rome as an autocracy, which began with Augustus Caesar, who came after him. So when we mark Julius Caesar, or when we mark the month of July, we are really marking the transition from, quite frankly, the United States, that is the sixth kingdom, to the seventh kingdom. The United States as a lamb to the United States as a dragon, or a dictatorship, if you want to put it like that. And I think that's where we reached, if I am not wrong. Uh, but I think we did mark something else. I think July 18th was key because July 18th is when um, July 18th is when Trump as a person is identified as as the the flag bearer, or that is when Trump himself is crowned by the Republican Party. Uh, yeah, so I think July 18th is key. Yes, maybe the month of July is important, but in for this for this story, I think July 18th is key, and then as the deadly wound, and then November 5th, when he is actually voted in and there's no turning back, then we can mark the death. But it has to be, the point is, it has to be in connection with voting or the election. And yeah, the entire month of July is not we can't mark the entire month of July as connected with voting, because there's July 1st, which has nothing to do with voting. There's July 13th and the rest. So I think July 18th is key because we get the concept of voting from the same Quintus Maximus. Sorry? Uh, I don't have at the moment. Maybe if someone has, you can give it. So I think the other thing that is important to note is we went to Revelation 13, verse 2, and we saw that when the beast is rising, he's given power, seat, and great authority. So I want us to just put that down. So we saw that he's given so it begins with a seat in the year 330, and then so this is the seat. This is the power. And this is the great authority. And then in 538 AD, this is where he begins ruling. So we saw this is when the capital of Rome, was moved from Rome to Constantinople, and basically when Rome was vacated, the Church of Rome, or the Catholic Church, had Rome all to itself. And then power, when basically the when the papacy receives the armies of Clovis, because it is in this year that Clovis dedicates himself to uprooting the three horns, that is the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Goths. And then 538 AD, Justinian declaring that the Pope is the head of all churches and that he's the corrector of heretics. And then the last of the obstacles, that is the Goths, are taken away in 538. And then the beast of Revelation 13, verse 2, begins ruling. And then when we look at, so let's note that this is the glorious land, or the sixth kingdom. So we can see the same with the rise of the seventh kingdom. We should be able to see them receiving the seat, power, and authority. We saw that the seat was received in 2016, received his power in 2019. And what exactly, here we are marking the 2016 presidential elections when he becomes president. 2019, we are marking the impeachment. Because we know that at the impeachment, they voted strictly along party lines, and he receives the support of basically all the Republicans. So when he received his seat, we marked the steps of a dictator as well, where we saw that first they begin with purging purging the party. We saw that it's the same thing that happened with the King of the South. So it begins with the purging and then takes control of the country and then takes control of the world. So once he became president, once he got his seat, began purging the Republican Party, and the people who were left were only loyalists. And you can say even the judiciary, the judicial arm of government was also purged. But let's just talk about the Republican Party, and that's what led to the power that he received here, because all he was left with were the people who were loyal and the people who were able to support him. And we can see the support in earnest here in 2019. And then in 2024, here we can see him receiving the authority with, now what we were saying, July 1st, in the case of Trump versus America. That is where, the same way the Pope was declared the head of all churches and the corrector of heretics, we can see Trump here being declared, being crowned king. No one can question whatever he does, he's untouchable. So this is where he gets his authority. And then uh, so let me just mark the exact date. So this is July 1st, 2024. And then July 18th, 2024. You can say here he rules because there's no one opposing him anymore. Yes, I think that's what we marked. And then I think there's something else that there's another line that I drew where we could mark a dictator from all the studies that we've done of Pyrrhus, from the Battle of Ipsus to the Battle of Heraclea, Beneventum. So we can mark so most of these things have been explained, so I'm just stating them as facts. So we can mark a dictator at each and every one of these waymarks from all the lines that we have gathered over the years. The only difference is here, the dictator is restrained. Here they are restrained, here they are restrained, and then here they are released or unleashed. So it is from there that I want us to pick it up today. So I'll just borrow the line that Godson ended with. So one thing, it should be, but 496 is his baptism. The taking away of the daily. And okay, I have a quote, but it's on my phone, where it identifies 508 as the year that Clovis sets himself to commit. So there's a meeting or some sort of conference that happens, and in that conference, Clovis decides that he's going to dedicate his his entire army to what to do what to combat these three horns that are of the Arian faith that are rebelling um, against who? Against the papacy. But I can give that later. I don't have it now. Yeah, so I was saying that from what we did, from what we've been doing in the morning, we can see, I mean, we've read numberless quotes that say that the book of Daniel and Revelation are one. Yeah, the same prophecies that are given in the book of Daniel are the same prophecies that are given in the book of Revelation. And I think to be able to get a complete picture of prophecy, you have to combine the two. And I think the prophecies that Daniel was giving were only were laying the groundwork for prophecy, because we see from well, Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, 9, Daniel chapter 11 and 12 are all giving, okay, maybe not 11, but are all giving the first four kingdoms, right? That is Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then there's Rome in two phases, which we can see clearly. There's pagan Rome and then there's papal Rome. But when we go to Revelation, we can see that Revelation is now giving more information. So while we get four kingdoms, while we get four distinct, clear kingdoms in Daniel, we get 8 kingdoms in Revelation. And I know in the past we've compared, we've gone into the depths of comparing the first four with the last four kingdoms, and we see the similarities between the first four kingdoms and the last four kingdoms, or even match them, how Babylon is the same as papal Rome, how Medo-Persia is the same as the USA, and so forth. So in terms that we understand, we can say that Revelation is a repeat and enlarge of Daniel. So it's not giving different information, it's only adding to what we already know, or what we have already gotten from Daniel. So the reason why I'm saying it's important to combine this to combine Daniel and Revelation is because so we mark Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Yeah, so let me just write pagan Rome and papal Rome. And this we get from Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8. And then when we get to Daniel 11, so we know that Medo-Persia gets its kingdom from Babylon, and then Greece from Medo-Persia, and then pagan Rome from Greece. Papal Rome takes over from pagan Rome. So when we get to Daniel chapter 11, Daniel chapter 11 is talking about the same thing, but now it is the theme of Daniel 11 is, okay, Ellen White says that this is is it Ellen White or who says that this is the rise and fall of kingdoms? But we can see Daniel 11 tells us talks about the king of the north, yeah? So begins talking about the king of the north from here, but we know that Babylon has been the king of the north before. So we can mark the king of the north all through, such that when one kingdom takes over from the previous kingdom, and when the previous kingdom took over from the one before that, what they are taking is the title of the king of the north. So this is information that we are getting from Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, and maybe 9. And this is what we are getting from Daniel 11. So when we go to Revelation, and we start adding on to what we already know, specifically Revelation 17, and we are told that there's a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. And I think there's a reason why in Revelation 13, the beast that is coming out of the sea has a semblance to Babylon, Medo-Persia, that is the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dreadful beast, which is, so this is the beast that is coming up out of the sea, and it has, I don't have the details straight, but is it the head of a leopard or the body of a leopard, leopard, bear, lion, and it's given its seat power, it's given seat power and authority by the dragon, which is, this is the dragon. So this beast has all the characteristics of the beast that has come before it, and I think those characteristics, I will say that this is the title, or this is the, we can summarize that as being the king of the north. So it's the king of the north, just like all the beasts that have come before it were the king of the north. So when we go to Revelation 17, and we are told that there's a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns, we know that there's a 6th and there's a 7th, and this is USA. And and then there's the 7th, and then we also know that there's the 8th. Yeah. Yes. So this is the king of the north. And well, the 8th, we know there's an 8th in quotes because the beast actually has 7 heads. There's no 8th head. But we are told that this beast, 5th head, resurrects and comes as the 8th. But what we know, that this is also the king of the north. When the 7th head takes over from the 7th kingdom, takes over from the 6th kingdom, it becomes the king of the north. So with that, we can look at the rise of pagan Rome and the rise of papal Rome so that we can see how modern Rome rises. So I think we had established that the 6th kingdom is the glorious land. The glorious land, yeah, the glorious land. The glorious land, or the lamb-like beast. So we can, when we look at the rise of pagan Rome, we know that they are introduced in prophecy in Daniel 11. Is it verse 14 or 13? Verse 14, where we told, and in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. And we know that the robbers of thy people here are Rome, because robbers of thy people, or the actual word is breakers of thy people. And when we go back to Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, and even 9, we can see how Rome is described. You know, they break everything into pieces. So that is where Rome is introduced in prophecy. So the robbers of the people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision. So and then it continues. The king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand. neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So we see that the chosen people do not withstand all this. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. So we can see that the glorious land is taken over in Daniel 11, verse 16. And we know that he takes over Syria as well. But we can also see that symbology more clearly in Daniel chapter 9, verse 9, where we see that the little horn waxes exceeding great toward the south, that's Egypt, towards the east, that is Syria, and towards the pleasant land, which is the glorious land, or Judea. But it begins with Syria in is it 65 BC? And then with Judea in 63 BC, or the glorious land. And then we can see later continues, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. So we can see verse 17 talking about from Julius Caesar to Augustus Caesar to Tiberius Caesar. And then verse 23 now takes us back. Verse 23 is not the next sequence from verse 22. Verse 23 now takes us back to when Rome actually comes in contact with God's people. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. And that takes us down all the way to verse 25. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand. That is the king of the south, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yeah, so that that is happening in 31 BC. And this is the Battle of Actium. When Egypt is taken. And then, so Rome or pagan Rome doesn't begin fully ruling until this point, because these are the obstacles that he has to get rid of. And it has to be, for Rome, it has to be in this order because of logistics. So he has to take over Syria, and for him to be able to take over Egypt, he has to take over Judea first, because Judea is actually in the way. If you have, the geography right of where Palestine or Judea was located, and where Syria was, and where Egypt actually was. For them to get to Egypt, they had to go through Judea. That is why Judea had to be conquered first. So Judea had to be conquered first before Egypt could be taken over. So keep that in mind. So we go on from verse 26. Here, they that feed on the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. We know that that's the story of Mark Antony, who is basically Egypt at this point, even though he was a Roman. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches. This is who? This is Octavian, Augustus Caesar, then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits. And I'm looking, where does it say forecast devices even for a time? Because I think I'm going down, 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 and I've not seen 24. Yes, 24. 24. I think we skipped that verse. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, yeah, and he shall forecast his devices from the strongholds even for a time. So this is a time, and we know a time is a year, 360 days, 360 years. And until, so forecast devices from the strongholds, we say that the strongholds is Rome for a time. And then we know in the year 330 AD, the capital is moved from Rome to Constantinople, and that marks the beginning of the fall of pagan Rome. So pagan Rome rules for 360 years. So this is when he rules. We look at papal Rome. So papal Rome is to follow the same structure. First obstacle, second obstacle, third obstacle, rule for a period of time, and then falls. So we begin. So we know about the little horn that comes up and then it uproots the three horns. We are not going to read all the verses. So we'll just state it as fact. The Heruli are taken first, and then the Vandals, and then in 538 AD, the Goths, and then we know that papal Rome then rules for a time, times and half a time, which is 1260 years. This is until 1798. So this is the period where he rules. So from here they fall, yeah. And then we look now at, so this is the structure that Rome takes, yeah. Three obstacles, and then rules for a designated period of time, and then falls. So we look at modern Rome. Same structure. So we should see modern Rome ruling for a period of time. So let us look at modern Rome. We can go to Daniel 11:40. So I want us to note that these kingdoms, they don't rule and they don't begin ruling until the last kingdom until the last obstacle has been removed. So rulership doesn't actually begin until this point. So Daniel 11:40. So from part B, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. Uh, Coming against, we know that's the USSR. in 1989, or at the time of the end. So comes against the king of the south. So this is the king of the south. And who is coming against the king of the south in 1989? Who is the king of the north? The USA. Verse, yeah, with like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. So the countries are the satellite states of the USSR. Verse 41, he shall enter also into the glorious land, and many shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So first obstacle has been overthrown. That is the king of the south. Verse 41 enters the glorious land, which remember we've already marked here. This is the fall of the glorious land. So what we are marking is 2024. So the glorious land is overthrown. And then verse 42, he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. And then we mark Egypt here. So if we are marking this as the Sunday law, and this is something that is happening in the glorious land. In the glorious land, we know it's the sixth kingdom, and we saw that where is this happening? In the United States, right? Within the United States. So the United States is falling from within. So this is happening, that this is something that is happening within the USA. So this Sunday law, these Sunday laws that we are marking here are the national Sunday law because it's happening locally within the United States. So this is actually, we'll just say national Sunday law. And then here I am going to mark the close of probation, which is the universal Sunday law. And we'll get into that. So this glorious land, we know it's the sixth kingdom. And I'm just going to say that Egypt is a symbol of Egypt is a symbol of the world. So I'll just say the world. Yeah. So I want us to recognize that this is the rise of the king of the north in Daniel 11 from verse 40 to 45. And the glorious land that is being overthrown here is the sixth kingdom. Is the sixth kingdom. And the kingdom that is rising is the seventh kingdom. And let's go to Revelation 17 now to identify the period when it's designated, that has been set apart for it. Verse 10, or from verse 9. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, as we can see there. So, 5 are fallen. Remember, as Amos took us through Revelation 17, we identified in verse 3 that Daniel is standing in 1798 because he's been carried in the spirit, not Daniel, John. He's been carried in the spirit into the wilderness and is seeing this woman who is drunken with the blood of the saints. So this is the 1260 that is past. So Daniel is standing in 1798. So when the 5 are fallen, we are talking about people Rome going backwards. One is, that is the USA, and I'm going to say that this is the USA, the glorious land, or the 6th kingdom, or the lamb-like beast, if you want to call it that. So you just have to juggle the different names for it at the same time. One is, the other is not yet come, which is the 7th kingdom. And when that 7th kingdom comes, he must continue a short space. And if this is the rise of the 7th kingdom, we know here that he is to continue for a short space. So I'm just going to mark a short space here. Continue a short space until what? So, well, the only thing that's left here is the second coming. Yes. So this story that we are seeing here, so first of all, we need to recognize that this is not about what is happening, at least whatever is happening here. This is not about what is happening it's not just about what is happening in America, first of all, because this is the US as we know it. This is the lamb-like beast, or the 6th kingdom, or the glorious land. And when we look at this, when we look at what has happened before, specifically what happened in pagan Rome, Judea, or the glorious land here, was not the main player. The glorious land here was only a means to an end for pagan Rome. And we've said logistically, for them to be able to conquer Egypt, they had to conquer the glorious land first. Similarly, here, the 6th kingdom, of course, or America, this is not a story about, what is happening in America. This is a story about how the 7th kingdom rises. And we know that what happened in America, that is this story here, is only a means to an end, and this is the goal. The same way as for pagan Rome, this was the goal, not so much the glorious land. They just had to conquer the glorious land for them to be able to pass. Similarly, for the 7th kingdom to be able to take over the world, it was necessary that first America, or the 6th kingdom, or the glorious land, be taken over. But this is the goal. Egypt is the goal. Because once you get rid of the 3rd obstacle, then you begin ruling. So once the 7th kingdom takes over Egypt, or the world, then its period of rulership begins, which is for a short space. So what this is telling us is what? So what have we always known? What have we always said Revelation 18 is about? Revelation 18 is where? This is the death of. This is where, punishment actually happens, which happens where? Here. Between the close of probation and the second advent. But what is this telling us? Revelation 18, or what we've known before, tells us that this is where this power comes to die, right? Are we together? This is where this power comes to die, but this seems looks like it's telling us something different, that this is not where it's dying, this is where it's actually at its pinnacle. And this is being, these are its witnesses, because for Ellen, what does Ellen White say about the papacy? The midnight of the world was what for the papacy? Was its noontide, right? This is where it was at its climax. Similarly, this period, which we call the time of trouble, that we say is that we have always thought that this is where this is the time of darkness for this power. We are seeing that this is actually where it's doing what? This is where it's actually at its pinnacle or at its climax. The other thing is when we so what do I call this? I'll just say USA again. Um, the other thing that we've always known, or that we've done, is and we say that this is the sixth, and this is the seventh. And where do we get this story? Huh? Acts 27. Yeah, so this is Acts 27. Tells us this, meaning that what does it tell us exactly? That the seventh kingdom begins where? Where does it actually begin ruling? Here, Sunday law, because the sixth kingdom here has died. But what this is telling us, this is giving us more information that the seventh kingdom actually doesn't begin here. The ruling of the seventh kingdom doesn't begin until the third obstacle has been overthrown. The same way the papacy didn't begin ruling. I mean, yeah, the daily was taken away in 508, meaning kingdom number 4 ended here, but kingdom number 5 didn't begin until the last of the 3 obstacles were taken away, which is here. The same way, the glorious land or the sixth kingdom might have been overthrown here, but the seventh kingdom doesn't actually begin until the last of the obstacles have been taken over, which is the COP. Um, yes.
Does that mean there is a power void between Sunday Law and COP? Or between the time, for example, 508 to where the last of the is taken? If there is a power void, how does it look like?
I wouldn't say there's a power void, because we know that these things don't happen like, today, stop, and then on 30th, the other one begins. You know that these things are happening. They are fluid, they are happening progressively, right? So even the end for the USA here, we might mark these dates, but in reality, how it looks like, there's no, I don't think there's an existent power void, because remember, this seventh kingdom that actually begins here, remember, it has been rising from here. So we can actually, if we want to mark the rise, we can mark, something progressive that is starting all the way from here. So I wouldn't really say there is a power void, because things don't happen in a I don't know what words to use, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yes. So that leads me to another question, that what is now so special by the time we are saying we are marking it to begin ruling?
What is so special?
Yes.
What is special is the third obstacle has been taken away. Before, there were still obstacles. So they don't begin ruling until the last of the obstacles have been taken away. That is actually the main argument that we have for saying that the sixth kingdom actually begins here. Because here we can see this kingdom as the period that is designated for it in prophecy. We don't mark its beginning. We don't mark the beginning of the time or the 360 years until this point. In as much as Rome has been rising from verse 14, and verse 14 is like really way, way early on when the Seleucid Empire is still existent. So, but it doesn't, I mean, yeah, that's where it's introduced in Bible prophecy, but it doesn't begin ruling until this point. Neither of these kingdoms begin ruling until this specific point. So the other thing I think that we had wanted to look at or to establish is we can see that for the king of the for the king at the Sunday law, this Sunday law, the USA, which we know is the seventh kingdom, is waging a war against the USA. So it's waging a war against itself, as we can see here. And we identified that this is something that is happening internally. So for the king of the north, we can see at the Sunday law, this is something that is happening internally. And then at the close of probation, this is something that is happening externally because it goes to take over the world. Yeah. And similarly, if we are to compare and contrast the king of the north or the story of the king of the north and the story of the king of the south, we should see the same thing. If the king of the north has an internal and external story, the same should happen for the king of the south. So at the Sunday law, we are seeing the king of the north, king of the south dying internally. Here, where is it? Here, the death. Here, the Sunday law, where we marked Navalny. But this compare and contrast shows us that if there's an internal for the king of the north and an external for the king of the north, then there should also be an internal and external for the king of the south. And we can mark the external death of the king of the south. Okay, even if it's not there, but we are seeing that there's an internal and an external, and the internal happened at the Sunday law in 2024. And we can see also, we should be able to see the external at the COP, like similar as for the king of the north. Yes, so I think I think I'm keeping time. The point of this study, as the topic suggests, was to mark the rise of the seventh kingdom. I didn't want to come here to the eighth kingdom because it was not my point, though maybe someone can take it up or we can look at it some other time. But to mark the rise of this kingdom here, the seventh kingdom. And we have seen, okay, we laid the groundwork for it before by looking at how the kingdoms from Daniel 11:40 to 45, seeing, getting the structure of the deadly wound and death, and looking at how these kingdoms resurrect and to die completely. So we saw the king of the south, deadly wound and its death, and the king of the north, and the glorious land or the sixth kingdom, deadly wound and death. And then we came here and saw how the kingdom, seventh kingdom, after the sixth kingdom has died, how does the seventh kingdom now rise to power? And we compared with the kingdoms that came before it, that is pagan Rome, papal Rome, for us to be able to see how modern Rome comes to power. I know we might have questions about maybe how the seventh kingdom is modern Rome, but I think that is the part of this study that comes here. Yeah, so we saw that this pagan Rome doesn't begin ruling until this point and rules for a designated period of time. Similarly, for papal Rome, begins ruling here for a designated period of time. Similarly, for the seventh kingdom, it doesn't actually begin ruling until this point, and here it is at its climax, and rules for a short space, which is its designated time. So what this calls us to do actually, or what this challenges us to do, is to, so first of all, to try and understand what really is, or how things are playing out here with, what's happening here with the rise of the eighth kingdom, and what does the ruling of the seventh kingdom look like. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is to refine our understanding of this history between close of probation and the second advent. Because remember, what we have always known is this is where the glory days of this kingdom come to an end. But what we are seeing now, that this is actually its glory days. So it calls us also to, challenges our understanding of this history between the close of probation and the second advent. And for me, I don't think any of this information is contradicting what we have learned before. I think it's only adding more information and opening our eyes to, things maybe that we had not seen before. For example, like this story of Acts 27 tells us that the king of the south, the king of the north, not the king of, yeah, the king of the north, or the seventh kingdom, begins here at the Sunday law. And this story here tells us that the seventh kingdom actually begins here. I don't think these two are contradictory. I think it's only, this is clarifying, or it's widening it to show us, for us to be able to probe and see what exactly is happening. So is it the Sunday law, or is it the close of probation? So when we look at the events, what is actually happening, then it can make sense. Or maybe this story is telling us what is happening internally within the United States, and this story is telling us that no, this is not only about what is happening internally. There's a story that is running at the same time that is happening externally. And according to the story that's happening externally, this is where the seventh kingdom begins. But according to the story that's happening internally, this is where the seventh kingdom begins. Anyway, just it's information to open up our minds and try and understand what actually is happening in the world. And I think my time is up. We can take questions during Q&A. I'm exactly on time. Let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for the light that you continue to shed upon us in this time. We thank you for the messages that you have opened up to us in the past and at this time. And at this momentous period in history, as we try to go back and understand how you have taught us and how you have led us in the past, we pray that, Lord, you may refresh our memories. We pray that you may open up our minds, and we pray that you may also give us the capacity and time to prioritize to study what you have taught us in the past, because we know that uh, uh, new truths are only unfolded as the old truths are understood. We ask that, Lord, we may be receptive to these new truths, because it is nothing new, and that your Spirit may continue to guide our minds, to guide our thoughts as we look around us in the world to see what is happening and how all these things are leading us step by step to the close of this art's history. We pray that you may prepare our hearts for your coming. We pray that you may continue to bless us each day and that you may lead us um, in the paths of righteousness. It is our humble prayer in Jesus' name.